Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all my Ancient Treasure Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile. This is the newest support we got for Unagi's deck from the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds series. He had an Ancient Treasure deck that had rare artifacts from all over the world combined together into this one deck. We got the Crystal Skull and a couple other spells back in the Crystal Revenge booster set, but we actually got more cards to make this a full-fledged deck now, with burn damage being the full focus for its playstyle. So very happy with the results of the deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the main deck monsters, our first treasure is the Crystal Skull. If this card is summoned, you take 1,000 damage, then change this card to defense position. During the end phase, if you did not take effect damage this turn, you can either add to your hand or special summon one rock monster with 0 attack from your deck. You go and use this effect of Crystal Skull once per turn. So the effect damage that you would take yourself can be changed over to your opponent with the form of the spell Curse Reflection Doll. So when a monster effect is activated that would inflict damage to you, you can give it to your opponent, meaning that you won't take the damage, and then you'll be able to use the summon effect of the Crystal Skull at the end of the turn to give you the additional setup of your other monsters needed, because our main play in the deck is to set up the monsters for Triangle O to then inflict heavy burn damage to your opponent using this spell. Along with the 3 Crystal Skull, we are also running 3 copies of the Ashoka Pillar. If this card is summoned, you can add 1 equip spell from your deck to your hand. Then if this card is in attack position, change it to defense. You go and use this effect of the Ashoka Pillar once per turn. If it's destroyed by battle or card effect, take 2,000 damage. So we'll get to the 2,000 damage right after we go over the main deck monsters. As I said, it plays into one of our spell cards, but we can also use Curse Reflection Doll along with the Ashoka Pillar if our opponent does destroy this card. But you can always just use Ashoka Pillar as a normal summon, get your equip spell search, and then search out some pretty useful equip spells like Snatch and Steal to then be able to take your opponent's monster and then use that monster in the Ashoka Pillar for a link summon, getting away with avoiding the destruction of the Ashoka Pillar to then have the additional setup for your other monsters that you can summon out and avoid the burn damage. And then the last of the main deck artifacts include the Cabrera Stone. If this card is summoned, you can add 1 Triangle O from your deck to your hand. Then if this card is in attack position, change it to defense. You go and use this effect of Cabrera Stone once per turn, and if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, take 1,000 damage. So once again, damage that would be inflicted to your opponent using the Cabrera Stone. For the Triangle O play, just 3 additional copies of this card, so we have max numbers to search out. It is a level 1 monster, just like the Crystal Skull, so there are other spells that we can use to summon it out into the field, like 1 for 1, but we also have the Piri Reis map to be able just to search out this card and all of the other artifacts, since they all share 0 attack, to add to our hand to use for their own plays. Since these are all different rock monsters, I also run the 1 copy of Sentry Soldier of Stone. Just having all monsters you control being rock monsters, giving us an additional resource, as the Sentry Soldier of Stone from our graveyard can help with additional special summon plays from the extra deck, depending on the equip spells we use, just to get those monster resources, since we want to have all 3 of the ancient artifacts on the field to then make use of Triangle O. And then for more search power, I also run 3 copies of Asa the Earth Chandler. If this card, you can discard it and 1 Earth monster to add 1 Earth monster from your deck to your hand with 1,850 or less attack, whose original type is the same as the discarded monster. Also, you cannot activate non-Earth monster effects for the rest of this turn, and when your Earth monster is destroyed by battle, you can special summon this card from your hand. So along with just having another resource to summon out, we can use it to search the Cabrera Stone and the Ashoka Pillar. The Crystal Skull is sadly a water monster, so we can't search this card off of Asa, but being able to grab the other 2 artifacts and just a discard to set up other ones in our graveyard is why I like running 3 of this card. I thought of running Block Golem, but once again, it limits us, since we have to have just the rock earth monsters in the graveyard to use that card. And then lastly, the 2 copies of Nibiru for my main deck monster hand trap. I like this because it can clear out our monsters once again with a tribute, setting them up in the graveyard to use for some of the shuffle back power of cards like Triangle O. If we can't go for the destruction play, then we can use the tribute for those monsters, not gaining any additional attack to our opponent's token with our own artifacts, since they also just have 0 attack for that play. That's it for the main deck monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. I run 2 copies of Triangle O. If you control Crystal Skull, Ashoka Pillar, and Cabrera Stone, destroy all cards in the field. Also, for the rest of this turn, your opponent takes any effect damage you would have taken instead. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one of each Crystal Skull, Ashoka Pillar, and Cabrera Stone in your graveyard. Shuffle them into the deck and draw 3 cards. You can only use this effect of Triangle O effect per turn, and only once that turn. So this is the graveyard effect I mentioned before, just having the Cabrera Stone, the Ashoka Pillar, and the Crystal Skull in your graveyard to then have the shuffle back power to draw 3 additional cards can just give you more and more resources to use back into your hand depending on the play you want to go for. Like I said, you only need the 2 though, because we do have Cabrera Stone, which just summon being able to add Triangle O from our deck to our hand. I also run 3 copies of Stonehenge, along with being another equip spell. It is searchable off of the Ashoka Pillar. You target one monster with 0 attack in your graveyard, special summon it in attack position. If you do, equip it with this card. Then when this card is equipped by this effect, leaves the field, destroy that monster. So it will destroy the monster if you lose Stonehenge, activating the destruction effect of the said monster that you may have it equipped onto. Once again, being searchable off of the Ashoka Pillar. If you just have those 2 resources on the field, you can use Stonehenge to grab that last card and then potentially use that other card as well to then search out the proper card you may need for any of your plays. So 3 Stonehenge just keeps the resources going onto the field, having plenty of targets to then summon out also. I also run 3 copies of Curse Reflection Doll. When a monster effect is activated that would inflict damage to you, your opponent takes that damage instead. And when you take battle damage while this card's in your graveyard, you can set this card. You can only use this effect of Curse Reflection Doll once per turn, but having a card, as I said before, to then summon out Crystal Skull, taking the 1000 damage, but chaining Curse Reflection Doll, and then being able to make it so your opponent takes the burn damage means you won't take any, you'll get the additional search off of the Crystal Skull. And then if you take battle damage, which you more than likely will with this deck, being able to just reset up the Curse Reflection Doll back onto the field. For more search power, I also run 3 copies of Piri Reis Map. At the start of your main phase, add 1 monster with 0 attack from your deck to your hand, but half your life points after adding it to your hand until the end of the next turn after this card is activated. You cannot activate the added monster's effects or the effects of it until you normal summon that monster, which can easily be done since all of the artifacts can be normal summoned, and then just having that additional search to then go into another specific search you may want as well. And I also run for some of the lower numbers for our spells in the deck. 2 copies of Foolish Burial. We have the Triangle O target with the shuffle back power. You really only need the 1 to go for the burn damage play, but you can also just have this as a quicker way to get into the graveyard to have the shuffle back power if you have all 3 of the artifacts already in the graveyard to use. And also 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet, just another way to get the monsters into the graveyard per se, to then summon out with some of our spells as well back onto the field. And also the 1 copy of Attack the Moon. Once per turn, when a battle position of a rock monster you control is changed, you can target a spell or trap your opponent controls and destroy that target. So you can just activate your Attack the Moon, summoning out your Cabrera Stone or any other ones that would change their battle position, adding the equip spell, and then changing it to defense. And then you have a destruction play thanks to Attack the Moon to destroy one of your opponent's spell or traps, which is good to clear back row that may interrupt any of your artifact plays also. And also for more added support, 1 copy of Power of the Guardians. I like this play with the Ashoka Pillar just as added protection for that card as a card to add. Snatch and Steal off the ban list, and now just another way to take a resource in searchable off of the Ashoka Pillar. The 1 copy of 1-for-1 to grab the Cabrera Stone or the Crystal Skull. And also the 1 copy of Call by the Grave as just another way to stop any hand traps that our opponent may have as well. And then for the traps, I run 2 copies of Totem Pole. Your opponent cannot target rock monsters you control with 0 original attack with card effects. Once per battle, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can negate that attack and place 1 counter on this card. If this card has 3 counters, send it to the graveyard. If you have 3 or more rock monsters in your graveyard with 0 attack and different names from each other, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Any effect damage your opponent takes is double this turn. So you have the destruction play, the activation of Totem Pole to then make it so any of the damage you would have taken from the Triangle O would double against your opponent. So that means with the damage they would have taken from the Ashoka Pillar and the Cabrera Stone, that's 6,000 damage total right then and there. And if you had any Crystal Skulls with Curse Reflection Doll as well, that could be enough damage to then inflict game against your opponent. With the last trap in the deck being 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, we're not running as many monster hand traps, so just having this along with Nibiru, which if you didn't want to run Nibiru, you can always put Ash Blossom in for another spot there, but just 1 additional trap spot for this card. If you wanted to go for more of a fun variant, you could always drop down impermanence to 2 and run a third totem pole for more protection for your 0 attack point rock monsters. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run 2 copies of Salamangreat Almirage, needing 1 normal summon monster with 1,000 or less attack. So this is another way to avoid the burn damage with cards like the Ashoka Pillar. Summoning out the Ashoka Pillar, then getting our search for our equip spell with this card, and then you can just link away the Ashoka Pillar into Salamangreat Almirage, avoiding any of the burn damage that you might have taken if your opponent were to destroy this by battle or card effect, having the additional equip spell to then use also. It doesn't have to be the Snatch and Steal. You could always use the play for your Ashoka Pillar to grab Stonehenge as well, adding the equip spell from your deck to your hand, and then having the option to use it again the following turn. And then also for some of the other Link monsters, 1 copy of Link Karibo, 1 Relinquished Anima, 1 copy of Mrs. Radiant, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, and also 1 IP Masquerena for some of the Link 1s and 2s. For the other ones, 1 copy of SP Little Knight, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, 1 Apollosa, and the 1 Topologic Bomber Dragon, just as another destruction play, if any you can use with Curse Reflection Doll, having a faster way to destroy your own monsters, summoning out the artifacts to the zones that Bomber Dragon has to point to, and then using cards like Curse Reflection Doll just to send that damage back to your opponent. With the Xyz monsters being the 1 copy of Kikinagashi Fucho, Sylvan Princess Sprite, Assembled Nightingale, and also the Divine Arsenal Zeus, since the majority of the monsters we run for the Ancient Treasure deck being level 1 monsters to be able to overlay. And then as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, it's a pretty straightforward deck with the plays you can do, but very fun when you can accomplish them. You can summon out for your first initial play, as I mentioned before, using some of the initial monsters we had being your Crystal Skull and the Curse Reflection Doll. So what you'll do is you'll normal summon out the Crystal Skull, and then if it's summoned, you take 1,000 damage. So then you will chain Curse Reflection Doll, which will then inflict the damage to your opponent instead. So then you have a Crystal Skull that didn't take any damage, and then also with this card it changes to defense, but then at the end of the turn the Crystal Skull reads during your end phase if you did not take any damage, which you didn't thanks to the Curse Reflection Doll. You can then add to your hand or special summon 1 rock monster with 0 attack from your deck to your hand. So then with this card you can add the Ashoka Pillar or summon it out onto the field. If you summon it out onto the field, make sure you have a little more defense, like cards like Totem Pole, to protect the Ashoka Pillar, because otherwise your opponent's just going to attempt to destroy this card on the field. But along with the Ashoka Pillar being summoned out, you have a defense position Crystal Skull, and then an Ashoka Pillar, which can add an additional card like your Stonehenge from your deck to your hand, giving you a resource to use the following turn to then summon back another monster from the graveyard to the field. You have the 2 monsters on the field, but you also necessarily could use the search for that card to then have the additional setup for your Triangle O. If you have the protection of your Totem Pole and you manage to survive to the following turn, whether you open up the Cabrera Stone or get any of the spells that could summon it out onto the field, you could then go for the initial play. If you got past 3 attacks with the Totem Pole, that would set it up in your graveyard, adding the Cabrera Stone off of your Piraeus map, summoning it out, then activating the Cabrera Stone to then add your Triangle O to your hand. You have all 3 of the Ancient Treasures on the field, activating the Triangle Stone to destroy all 3 of the cards. You would take the effect damage from the Triangle Stone and the Ashoka Pillar, which would be 3,000 damage as well. But then you could chain, since you have all 3 of them in your graveyard, the Totem Pole to then inflict double the damage to your opponent with these cards on the field, and then that's 6,000 damage on top of the 1,000 that you would give to your opponent off of that play, just needing 1 additional 1,000 points of damage to finish off your opponent for the game. Another play that you can rely on is just with the Ashoka Pillar, where you can summon out the Ashoka Pillar using this card to then grab a resource from your opponent, and to do so you add to your hand the go-to spell for taking your opponent's cards, Snatch and Steal. You activate this, and then this can just be used to grab one of your opponent's monsters, and then with that you can go for a Link 2 play using these 2 monsters very easily to summon out a workable Link 2 monster on the field, and just by using 1 card in your hand. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, it's a very, very interesting deck and very, very fun. I was definitely very happy to be able to put it together using all of the cards. It only took a very long time for us to get all of Yunagi's cards, with Crystal Revenge being a couple years ago, and then now just recently getting the other ones as well. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.